All right. Last week we faked it. We brought back the backpack show, but it was just us. We were just kind of getting the rust off, knocking those shoes. Words. But we have a real life guest. We have Robbie Bach back. We had him in the first iteration of the backpack show talking about the first book, which was the Wilkes Imperative. Wilkes Insurrection. And then the Blockchain Syndicate is the new book. And we are going to talk books with a guy who is absolutely important to Xbox and Zune.
Hi everyone, Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gargone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
Boom.
Hi.
We stop. We have Robbie waiting for us backstage. You neglected to mention, because people might have forgotten in the ensuing years, that Robbie spent 22 years at Microsoft building Xbox into a global empire, gaming empire. So then decided to be a civic engineer and now serves on the board of Bipartisan Policy Center and writes political thrillers. So this is the thing. We love an interesting career journey on the Backpack Show.
Yeah, no, I didn't skip that. I was going to say it in this part, but you just did. So you did it perfectly. But not from your really awesome notes that I have only read just a tiny bit of. But what I will say is that, yes, because I'd forgotten that Robbie and I had talked before, but it was like, the pandemic. We were all a little foggy. But I had gushed thank goodness we talked about this, because I had gushed all over him about Xbox the first time. I was an original Xbox user. Halo was my jam. You didn't have to make any other games. I know that there was like a pressure to keep putting out more titles, but Halo was it. That's all I needed. And then I stopped writing seriously right after I put the Xbox One back in my house, which is a little after Robbie left. But I could say that gaming consoles are not great for book authors, as it turns out. But there was this pivot, like you said. There is the Wilkes Insurrection, and the Blockchain Syndicate just came out a couple of months ago, and I think October. Tamika Smith is back. We have a lot to cover, and so we'll bring them on. And then, Kerry, I don't know if you've got a first question. If not, I will. But hey, Robbie, welcome back.
Hey guys, how are you? Good to see you again.
This is about the time in the show that you're probably regretting everything. So,
oh come on, this is the highlight of a fun morning. So I'm excited to be here and talk with you guys. It should be fun.
I have to ask, and if I asked you this in 2021, I apologize, but I didn't rewatch it. You left Xbox at like the peak of success in 2010, and you could have coasted. You could have just done like board seats and kind of taken it easy, and instead you went civic engineer and thriller novelist. I was going to say thriller author, but thriller novelist. And these are not like light reads. These aren't beach trash books. These are very involved. So it's actually, to my eyes, quite a lot of work what you decided to do after. So tell me about the transition.
Well, the transition for me, I think, starts with the idea that I never used the word retired. I felt like my time at Microsoft, which was 22 wonderful years, was sort of, to use a theatrical term, my act one. And so I was moving to not away from Microsoft or not into retirement, but to a second act. And that second act involved, as you point out, some board work, Boys and Girls Clubs, at that time, the U.S. Olympic Committee, the Bipartisan Policy Center, which I really enjoy, but also to this thing called civic engineering, which is, how do we help make our communities better? And how do we help organizations, governments, and other people do the work that needs to be done to create great communities? And as part of that, I stumbled into writing. I wrote a nonfiction book and discovered, oh, hey, I really like this writing thing. This is really fun, but nonfiction's not my gig. It's a little too dry for me. So I needed to challenge myself to do something new. So I started writing fiction and developed a whole new side of what I do. And it's a great passion.
It's interesting to me because I feel like the civic engineering work really kind of crisscrosses into the thriller work alongside the technology. Because, for instance, it applies, business and systems disciplines. It's basically people aren't making problems. There are process problems that then make things not turn out that way. When was the first inkling of like, I feel like I'm explaining this well, but I bet if I did this in a way where I wrote a fiction where I could also kind of preach what I'm feeling, I could do it better that way. When was that in your brain?
Well, after I launched the first book, the nonfiction book, Xbox Revisited, which was a civic strategy book, and I still sell a fair amount of that book. It's a really nice strategy book. It's what I use when I go do public speaking, and it's great. But when I got to thinking, well, I'm going to write a second one, I said to myself, right, how many people are going to read this kind of stuff? And how do I grab their attention more while still delivering some of the same messages? And to me, that meant writing fiction, because the audience isn't fiction. It's a much broader audience. It's a much wider canvas. It gives me the ability to explore other things. And so my job is to write a great thriller. That's job one. So I got to do that. And then my second job is at the end of the book for you to step back and say, oh, wait, he snuck it in on me. I learned something. And that's really where the art for me comes in. And that's why I do what I do. It's a real joy.
So I couldn't help but admire how clearly your project management expertise comes across in the book. So at one point, a villain delivers a body to the Capitol Rotunda. And I'm reading this thing thinking there's timing, access, precision. This is a lot of project planning. So did your Xbox product launch experience shape how you write these thriller novels?
It does and it doesn't. So that's what's so interesting. So it does in the sense that when I'm writing a scene like that one, that's the first scene in the Blockchain Syndicate. When I'm writing that scene, I have to think through every aspect of it, just like somebody who's building a product would have to think through every aspect of how this is going to happen. You got to think through, as you say, security, the security guard, the cameras, the lighting, of the time of day. How did the guy get there? How did he know what to do? All those things. And so when I'm crafting a scene, that's the way I'm thinking about doing it. But there's other parts of this that are kind of the opposite of creating a video game. So in the writing world, there's this discussion about whether you are a plotter or a pantser. And a plotter outlines the entire book and does all the research and makes sure they knows everything, and then suddenly they will sit down and write it straight through. And I'm not a plotter, I'm a pantser. So I start with the scene you just described in the Blockchain Syndicate. I wrote that scene first. That scene takes place 2/3 of the way through the book, 3/4 of the way through the book. And everything from then is following the character arcs for my main characters to get to that point. And I am making it up 100% as I go along. And so that is kind of the anti-product thing. So I have a little bit of both sides of the brain working on this kind of stuff. And, that's kind of, I guess it says something about me. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it says something about me.
One of the elements of the book is that the group is a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, meaning it's it's a distributed entity. This is normally something we talk about with very noble causes in mind.
Sure.
We could use this to plan a better Seattle, and that is usually how we talk about it. This is like a mechanism for chaos, and I'm curious, what made you think that, and does it kind of follow that concept of we're always scared of the thing we don't fully understand? So blockchain, DAO, all that stuff was pretty interesting at the start of the time you were writing this. Is that why we picked this kind of format?
It is. And there's a theme in both of my books, which is that technology, A, super important. B, technology itself is neither good nor bad. And so part of the reason to show blockchain and the DAO as part of this book isn't because I want to demonize blockchain or DAOs, but you just have to point out that blockchain has a lot of positive uses and it's very productive. It's generated a whole economy, for crying out loud, a whole set of currencies and a whole bunch of other things. So that's really powerful. But at the same time, we have to know technology can be used both ways. And I would say the same thing about AI. I'd say the same thing about social media. I'd say the same thing about the internet. I mean, there's a whole series of things that follow that theme. And so that's sort of a premise of mine. I think people tend to want to either demonize or lionize technology. And my view is technology just is. And it's the things you use it for that we should be demonizing and lionizing. And that's where the focus has to be.
So what then makes crypto such an effective thriller weapon? There's risks to it that I think people don't appreciate. or willfully ignore
Sure.
that you capitalize on that?
Yeah. Well, to me, the blockchain part of this that makes it so interesting is people think about it this way. In the 60s, if you were writing this thriller, my main character would have been a mafia boss, right? And there would have been a family. And you would know who everybody was in the family. And the FBI would be tracking everybody who was in the family. And they'd follow you around and say, oh, he met with that guy at that Italian restaurant in the back room that nobody knows about. And, that would be the way the thing would work, right? But blockchain and the DAO enables you to have a mafia family without anybody knowing who's in the family. Even the guy who's running the thing doesn't know who the rest of the people are in person. So that to me is just a fascinating construct. It just enables so many levels of uncertainty. And by the way, sets up one of my main characters, Bryce Roskovich, to try to go figure it out. And since he's the ultimate technology guy, this is a challenge for him to decode this and really figure out what's going on.
It definitely, I have 8,000 questions. Chloe also has a question. Chloe says, is it challenging to balance dramatic storytelling with real world plausibility? She hasn't read the book yet, she says.
Yeah, it is. Although here's the way I think about it. I want to challenge people and I want to reach out to things that we might not think could happen. So let's say that's the art of a thriller, is to surprise people with something that they might not think would happen. But then my challenge as an author, and the thing I spend the most time on, is making sure that authentically it could happen. So actually go through the math, the science, the sociology, whatever it is, to make sure it could happen. So I do a lot of research on that. I talk to a lot of people. I care a lot about the authenticity of detail. There's a scene in the first book, not giving much away, where an airplane has to fly and we don't know where the airplane's going. Well, when I originally wrote that, I just sort of said, oh, well, they turned off their transponder and disappeared. Well, it turns out if that happens, fighter jets show up in your windshield, right? So you don't want to do that. So I actually talked to a bunch of two guys who are pilots, and they explained to me how the system works and how I needed to rewrite that scene so that it would be authentic, but yet still possible. And so that's what I really care about. I do want to challenge and push the outer boundary, but I want to make sure you know that, oh, wait, that actually could happen. And he's thought it through, and this is a real life scenario. That's what brings the tension to me to the story.
I think your main character brings attention to the story. She's very comfortable with uncomfortable truths. Put it out there, puts it all out there, and it's real and it's raw, and it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. Do you think that we are past the point, like as a society, where rational arguments work? Like, do we have to drop the emotional hammer for something to resonate?
I hope not. Let me say it that way. I hope not. I think, look, there are most things have what I would call an EQ side and an IQ side. Most things have both parts of what you were just discussing. They have a rational, thoughtful, logical approach to things. And Tamika Smith, she's a U.S. senator. She's, got advanced degrees. She's a really smart person. So she understands the intellectual part of it. But she also has a very high EQ for understanding the emotion that comes with things. And so to me, when you're solving these problems, when you're trying to have these discussions, if I'm having a discussion with you about a political issue or challenging social issue, I need to both understand the rational argument and be able to present it and respond to the emotional response that I know is inevitably going to come. And you have to be able to do both of those. And, this is the hard part, because most of us are not given 50% EQ and 50% IQ. Some of us are 90% IQ and 10% EQ, and some of us are the other way around. And so that's what makes conversations real and interesting.
I think of Tamika as kind of a Jack Ryan kind of character, in that sense that she is, an analyst gone further into the realm of having to do stuff. However, she's much more decorated. Jack was like boots on the ground level. She's kind of gone a little bit further in her career. That's interesting to note, just because she has sort of like better bona fides. What are the quirks? Because you've said, even in your own interviewing and stuff, you've said that it's really important to have quirks and traits and things that kind of take them off the God level. What do you think about when you ask the kind of question, what would she do in this moment or whatever? How do you keep us with her?
Yeah, Tamika's quirks and her faults are, she is for sure impulsive. So she, to Carrie's earlier point, while she has a rational thought as a strategist, she will respond to the emotion of the moment. And you'll see that a number of times in the Blockchain Syndicate, where she doesn't think, she just does. And sometimes that's good. And sometimes, as you see, it gets her into trouble. So that's one of the things where I think she really struggles. I also think she has some emotional scars that impact the way she acts and the way she responds to things. I mean, if you know her background from the Wilkes insurrection, she has PTSD both on a personal level and at a military level. And so dealing with that, those set of emotions while you are doing and being incredibly productive and incredibly visible and out in the public, I think is a huge challenge. And you'll see her in the book where she deals with the tension and the anger, and then like literally has to go close the door to her office and go out and meet with her team. And figuring out that transition for her is really tricky. I had a friend who read Tamika. Tamika's Black, and I'm a Black woman. I'm a white guy, and so one of the things I wanted to make sure of is that, you know, people didn't think I was trying to write something I'm not. And so I had a friend of mine who happens to be a Black woman, and she read it and she said the thing she loved about it is I didn't try to make Tamika perfect, and that I didn't try to, you know, while including a Black character as a main character in my book, I wasn't trying to make her perfect. I was trying to draw her as a real human. And that's the highest compliment somebody can give me. If they could say, hey, one of your characters is a real human, that's a cool thing.
They feel real. No, definitely so. Robbie, I'm going to put you backstage for just 1 minute, just so I can do a couple of reads on our wonderful sponsors. I have two. Chloe Forbes Kinlan, who you've seen, and she has another question that we're going to follow up right afterwards. Chloe is, she's done many different things in many different ways. She's doing a lot of help with people in logistics and how to figure out how to turn your operations into an asset and not, a headache every single day of your life. If you go to Chloe's site, you could go to businessops.co/backpack. You can get a free Notion for Business starter kit. This includes this navigating Notion course. I have to tell you, any of Chloe's courses are so thorough. I can't figure out why she doesn't charge $1,000, but I guess, I haven't quite beat her into that. She's upped her prices over the years to an actual price that you would expect to pay someone who could do all this sort of stuff. But I think you could still get in now because she's the right prices for that. Also, Fazia just showed up. Fazia Burke is here. Follow her Substack for practical real-world ways to integrate AI into your work. FaziaBurke.substack.com. It is a crazy world for authors now that they can start to build their own connections, their marketing, their sales, everything using this sort of thing. So it is just an absolute magical time in our life. I'm going to bring Robbie back on, and then Carrie, if you don't mind handling Chloe's question, and then I know you had another one or 20 of your own.
You're so mean, 20 my own. It is my job to have questions, okay? So yes, I have a lot of questions. Chloe wanted to know, let's see. She said that it sounds like a compelling combination, the kind of work you do that you put into your thriller novels, and also a lot of research. Do you enjoy the research? Do you enjoy that part?
I really do. I love digging into things. I love learning. I mean, part of the reason I left Microsoft, in fact, was I didn't feel like I was learning enough new, and I wanted to explore new things. And, the idea that I would decide to become a fiction writer was really an exercise in newness and exploring something new. So I enjoy digging in. And a part of the reason I enjoy digging in is it's not just me doing research like scouring the internet or whatever, or asking ChatGPT for some, a summary of things. It's interviewing people and talking to them and asking them and getting their insight and getting the personal, that EQ stuff that we talked about earlier, getting that EQ side of what's going on. Those interviews are fun. And, it's worth reading the acknowledgments in both books, because those are the people who really help me try to get some of the stuff right. And occasionally I take some literary liberties, but they've really helped me get stuff right. I'll give you just one quick small example. There's a scene in the book very early on. It's a school shooting. And I have a friend who I work with on a local board who was a captain in the local police force. So he read the scene, sent me like 3 pages of detailed feedback. Then we chatted on the phone and I got to know him better. That to me is awesome. It's just the best part. And it makes the book better too, which is a nice positive side effect.
That's an interesting point. Why open on something so traumatic?
Well, so this is a genre thing, right? So in the genre, if somebody's reading a thriller, if something doesn't happen in the first 10 or 15 pages, they're not reading the book. And it's just a genre. It's a genre thing. It's part of the reason why I start with the prologue, because that prologue is designed to intrigue. Okay, how are we going to get there? What's that about? And it's part of the reason why, in a first early scene, in the Wilkes insurrection, it's a plane crash. In the Blockchain Syndicate, it's a school shooting. But you start, and it propels the action forward, and now enables you to bring in a lot of other things. So it's just sort of part of it. When I wrote Wilkes insurrection the first time, the first draft of that, it took about page 50 before you got to the plane crash. That had to be rewritten.
Because this is the Backpack Show, and because I love a non-linear career journey, I'm going to ask this. You reinvented yourself successfully more than once. So someone's probably listening that thinks, I would love to do something different, but I'm terrified. Right. What's the first thing they need in order to make a change?
Yeah, I think the first thing you need is you have to feel comfortable with what you're leaving. And I know that sounds strange, but I think some people, struggle with getting to the next thing and really committing to it. And they get kind of partway there and they dabble and they do a few things, but you don't really emotionally get there. So for me, the first thing I had to deal with, look, I loved Microsoft. I had 22 wonderful years. I had a really good job, but I got really comfortable with the idea that A, I wasn't learning as much. B, I didn't love the current thing I was doing. And C, the people I was working with at the end of my time there kind of drove me a little crazy. And so I knew it was time. And once you get comfortable with the idea that you got to move to Act 2, now to me, there's this rush of adrenaline about the excitement rather than the fear. And since I got nothing to hold on to, now I propel myself forward. So if I were talking to somebody, I'd say, hey, make sure you're ready. And when you're ready, declare it, accept it, and move on.
I really like that there's a real through line. I think that there's an interesting thing from your 22 years at Microsoft. You work with boards and also the concept of civic engineering. The fact you're teaching leaders, I feel like this is an appropriate argument towards government systems, especially regional and state and whatever, that they needed to learn something from business, such as the experience building complex systems, a comfort with ambiguity, the bias towards execution, and also accountability for results. I was thinking, so Microsoft, that's that. Civic engineering, explaining to government groups, you got to stop trying for focus groups every 21 seconds. Like, you've got to actually do a thing. And then Tamika, as a perfect avatar for some of this, I was thinking about Jasmine Crockett recently. I'm not in any way a particularly political person, but I saw that a certain U.S. vice president was pooping on her, and that she came back and said, look, the reason I'm running for Senate in Texas is that I'm a person who was a doer. I was a criminal attorney. I was doing all kinds of this work. I'm a person with a bias towards action. I feel like Tamika and Jasmine Crockett would be friends. And I also just feel like it pulls your whole through line. How do you feel at what I'm explaining here?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think part of the challenge in civic organizations, whether they're nonprofit or government, is this comfortability with change, newness, and driving new things, and B, a question about how do we get great execution, to your point. And so, when I'm working on a nonprofit board or I'm working with somebody who's working in government, I'm always asking the question, are you driving change? Are you thinking about new things? And how do you make sure that that stuff is actually getting done well? I spent a lot of time with Boys and Girls Clubs of America, which is a great organization. And one of the things I love about them is that they are constantly exploring and doing new things. And they are absolute demons about getting execution right. And that makes for, really great outcomes. To me, if I said I'm a business leader and I'm coming to government, I'm going to run it like a business, that's a mistake, right? And no more than if I was a government leader and I came to a business and say I'm going to run it like the government, that would obviously also be a mistake. But if I can come from business, and say, hey, I brought these 3 things in my backpack, to use your show analogy, brought these 3 things in my backpack and I'm going to apply them in a new place. That to me is super powerful. And what we need when we're solving problems, we need government leaders, we need civic leaders from nonprofits, and we need corporate leaders and the tools that each of them brings. And so the secret is mixing those things together.
I was waiting for my turn. 4 years ago, the Wilkes insurrection. 4 years ago is like 84 years ago, right? Yeah. So what's changed for Tamika? Because a lot of things have changed for us. And what's changed for you in that time?
Well, for Tamika, I think the things that have evolved and changed, first of all, her life has fully moved to being a U.S. Senator. So in the Wilkes insurrection, she was still in the Air Force. She was deciding to run for the Senate. So she's trying to figure out, is that something she can do? Now she's in it. She's got a staff. She's got a team. So in a way, she has moved on to her Act 2. And she's now fully in her Act 2 and trying to think that through. The other thing that's changed for her is the political landscape around her is evolving at warp speed. And it is becoming, sadly, more polarized, not less. And since she works and manages a coalition of people that is about bipartisanship and fighting polarization, her job is getting harder and harder and harder as these books progress. So that to me is an interesting challenge. For me, the things that have changed, I'm a little more comfortable in what I'm doing in my Act 2. I have my speaking work that I do. I've got my writing work. I've got my nonprofit, for-profit board work. So I feel like I kind of have a system in place. But again, the world around me is changing. There's more anxiety in my life than there probably has been since the launch of Xbox back in 2000. And those are all external anxieties. My personal life is quite fine. I don't have like personal anxieties per se. When I get up in the morning and read the news, my blood pressure goes up. And so some of the reason I write is to deal with that and to express myself and to deal with the anxieties that come from the environment and the world we live in. I've been writing letters on LinkedIn. So if somebody goes and looks on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see, I think there's now 9 letters. And I wrote a letter to my parents. I wrote a letter to my kids. I wrote a letter to Kristi Noem. I wrote a letter to the Democrats and the Republicans. I wrote a letter to 2026 yesterday. And those letters are expressing my points of view about things and what's going on in the world, but they're an outlet for the anxiety I experience. So that to me is a little challenging. And the final thing I'll say quickly, sorry, I'm running on this, but it's a really good question. I became a grandparent in this period. So I now have 2 grandkids, and a third one on the way, which is really exciting, but it's a change, right? It's a new role. It's a new thing. It's also, emotionally, this realization, there's now a 3rd generation in the family.
Congratulations. That is
all of that's going on
so
at the same time.
I was just going to say, I want to write a love letter to 2019. Like, I miss you, boo.
Exactly. 2019 seems like a good year in retrospect, for sure.
Oh my gosh, it really does. All right, we're nearing the end part of the show, so I'm going to do this.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
And we're going to give it to Joanne because she had stopped in and said hello. And I think that entitles you, Joanne, to a free apple. You just have to walk into any store, take it, and run real fast, get out before anyone sees you, and you're going to be just fine. You can just eat it. You don't even have to clean it off. It's perfectly fine. All right. So we've come to the part of the show where I just realized I don't have a graphic for, which is the question that we ask every guest, which is what goes in your backpack. Now, the whole idea of this is that in your backpack is things that are portable, you're going to take with, they're metaphorical, they can be physical. We've had all kinds of crazy things. Carrie, what's an example of something physical someone has added to the backpack?
Extra set of teeth. DJ Cumberbund.
I feel like we're going to have to make some new ones for after we get a few more guests in 2026. Carrie, what's an example of a metaphorical thing one could add to a backpack?
Nikki Porcher of Buy From a Black Woman said she would put Black women in her backpack, by which she meant her professional network.
And now we get to ask Robbie Bach again for the second time because he's Bach. Robbie, what are we going to add to the backpack this time through?
Well, the physical thing I'll add to the backpack is a heating pad for my back, literally. So one of the challenges of being a writer is you spend a lot of time in this sort of thing doing this. And so I work out a lot to try to keep my body in shape, but my back every once in a while bugs me. And, so I have a heating pad here. I can actually show it to you. I got my little heating pad here, and I can put that in the backpack and help me carry it. The more metaphorical thing and the more philosophical thing I put in my backpack recently is to really focus on the concept of gratitude. I talked earlier about the dealing with anxiety. And one of the ways that I'm learning to deal with that is to really be grateful for the things we have and to really focus as much as I can in a day and start a day with a moment of thinking about gratitude and what I have to be grateful for that day. And that gets my day started off on a positive foot before I doom scroll into the news cycle of the day and try to avoid doing that. So those would be the two things I would add most recently to my backpack. I think my backpack's getting a little crowded. It's more like it's a frame. It's a metal frame with some heavy duty straps. So I have to carry a fair number of things with me to get through. But that's just because I'm moving on in years and moving on in experiences, I suppose.
A lot of great experiences along the way. Well, one thing that you made me think about was that my grandfather used to have a really cool thing about one of those old-timey frames. He had one. He was born in 1920, so I'm talking really old-timey frames. But when he would go out and he would work on lifting weights in the garage,